Hey guys, glad to have you on the channel today. I want to start today's video by asking you guys a few questions. Do you have an army that you want to get painted up especially fast? Maybe it's for a tournament, maybe you just simply want to have it on the table ready to play with paint on it. If you look at your mini collection, is the majority of it gray or is the majority of it painted? Are you collecting miniatures faster than you can actually paint them? And finally, do you find when you paint that you are struggling to get your painting process faster than that of a snail? It's just taking forever to get models done and you're exhausted by spending an entire week only getting a few models finished. Well, if you answered yes to any of those questions, then this video should be helpful to you. Now, first of all, let's talk about what I mean by painting fast. What I don't mean is that we completely sacrifice quality and the look of our models in order to have paint on them. That's not what we want. What we want is to have models that look good, but that we're able to finish in a quick, short period of time. Now, obviously, there is a little bit of subjectivity to the idea of quality, to the idea of speed. But for you, you've got to find that balance of what you consider fast and what you consider quality. And we want to find a way for them to meet together. Now to do this, I'm going to give you 3 tips and I'm going to give you 3 tricks. The tips are simply mentality focused things that will help you in the way that you view miniature painting in order to paint faster while maintaining a semblance of quality. These are things that aren't necessarily techniques, but they are things that will help your mindset and help the way that you approach mini painting to allow you to paint your miniatures faster. Now, the 3 tricks are techniques. They are specifically geared towards the way you paint miniatures and how you can physically paint them faster. Maybe you're here and you're going, I don't really care about the mindset stuff. Go ahead, look at the chapter markings down in the description and jump ahead to those tricks. But I would encourage you that mindset has a lot to do with how we paint. It has a lot to do with becoming a better painter. Developing your skills, gaining more experience, all of those things are directly tied to your mentality. And if you want to become a better painter, then one of the things that you need to do is you need to do as much to train your mentality and to train the way that you personally attack miniatures as it is to train your abilities with a brush. So I would highly encourage you to look at those 3 tips, and maybe those will help the way that you view models in order to help you to paint them faster. So with those in mind, let's go ahead and look at our first tip. Tip number 1 is this: change your perspective. Here's the reality to painting models quicker. What that means is that you've got to change the way that you view how these models should be seen. When we're painting for quality, what we're doing is we want to see models up close. If you see somebody posting pictures on Instagram of their models, the goal there really is quality, because you're going to be seeing that model up close. Because you might realize this, having tried to take pictures of your minis, that it really shows a lot of the flaws. It shows a lot of the mistakes. And here's the reality to painting fast. We really need to start looking at our models from a tabletop view. If you're going for quality, yeah, we want to see it through the lens of a camera. And we want to make sure that those blemishes and those imperfections are taken care of. But if you want to paint models quicker, you need to stop during your painting process, hold that model at arm's length and see how it looks. Yes, if you want to show it off to your friends, if you want to show it off on Instagram, it's not going to look as well. But the reality is the time that you put in is directly tied to quality. I reached out to Jake Spur, who has the Instagram account Airbrush. Absolutely amazing miniature. If I could show a little bit of his work here as an example. You look at his paint job here and it's absolutely amazing. It's breathtaking. His work is, I find, to be some of the most inspiring work that I see anywhere. I constantly go to his pages to look for inspiration. I constantly go to his pages just to kind of be in awe of the paint jobs that he does. Now, if you want your models to look like this, you've got to put the time in that Jake is putting in. He's putting in hours. He's being meticulous with the way he attacks these miniatures. What that means is he's not able to get done as many because he wants them to be higher quality paint jobs. Now, on the other hand, you look at some of the work that I've done and it in no way compares to anything that Jake has done. But the reality is that I'm getting a lot more of my miniatures painted. There's a direct correlation between the time you put in and the quality of your work. So if you want to paint faster, realize that your quality has to suffer a little bit. That doesn't mean just throw blobs of paint on, but that does mean change your perspective. Stop comparing your faster painted miniatures to the works of guys who have spent countless hours on their miniatures. They're not going to stack up and they're not supposed to stack up. Tip number 2 is this: set goals. The best way to get things done is to have a timetable in mind for when you want to finish it. You say, I'm going to start it here, and this is the end point for it, and make sure you stick to those goals. The problem is, for a lot of people, they sit down at their painting desk not really knowing what they want to paint, just kind of waiting to be inspired. And while that's not always bad, and please don't feel attacked if that's you, when painting fast, the mindset that you have to have is, I'm going to have these guys done in X amount of time. It pushes you to make sure that you're not being meticulous about little things that don't matter, but instead you have a mindset of, I need to be productive. I need to go to the next thing. For me, I always am working 2 weeks out. So I'm currently working on this week's models, but then at the same time, I know what I'm painting next week, and I'm currently building them, I'm priming them, and I'm laying out color schemes that I know that I'm going to use for them. I have a notebook full of color schemes that I'm using for all of my models, so that when I sit down to paint them, I have everything laid out. I know the models I'm working on, I know the colors I'm using, and I can go straight into being efficient and productive. Where there is no plan, there will be no production. That's the reality to painting faster, is you need to set goals, stick to them, challenge yourself, and that will tremendously speed up your ability to paint models. Tip number 3 is practice. And while that may seem dumb, it may not seem entirely useful, it's a mindset you need to have when you go into painting. Now, I'm a jack of all trades type of painter. I wouldn't say there's anything that I'm especially great at. There's nothing that I am a master in the area of painting, because one of the things that I do is I am constantly working on different techniques, different styles of painting. You go to some of these guys and they are masters of quality painting. They are masters with a brush, and they are so good at producing works of art. Now, they spend all this time learning techniques, they spend all this time developing those skills. They may not be as good at painting models fast as someone who really is about, I want to paint fast. I'm not out for Golden Demon awards. Understand that there's a lot of skills within painting, and if you're not going to take the time to develop them, you are not going to have them. So if you want to paint faster, you need to be developing the skill of finding that balance between quality and speed. There are guys out there who paint really well, but they struggle to be able to bring that painting level down in order to paint more models. That perfectionism that leads to great quality can be a struggle if you're trying to get faster speed, and vice versa. Guys who always want to be cranking out models struggle to sit down and paint quality models because they're just not used to spending 10, 20, 50 hours on a single miniature. They want to crank them out fast. If you want to paint fast, develop that skill set. It's absolutely important that you have that mindset. It's a skill set to develop. It's not just something that you have a couple tricks and all of a sudden you can do. So let's flip from the mindset of how do we paint fast to what are some tips, what are some tricks, what are some techniques we can pull into our miniature painting that'll help us get models on the table looking great faster. My first trick would be this. Use your contrast, speed, instant, express colors as not just your all-in-one paint, but use them as your base paint and your wash all in one, but then build up from there. Don't stop there and go, this is good enough. Now, it may be good enough, but maybe you want to push that quality just a little bit. This is a way to speed up your painting while maintaining a level of quality. You use those contrast paints. I'll use that as an example. Let's talk contrast paints. Fill in whatever the blank is for the paint that you're using that's kind of in that category. For contrast paint, you might lay it down and then it automatically has kind of your base colors. It's got a little bit of highlights, but it's also got some shadows in there because contrast paints work very much like a wash would, right? Well, now come back over with your highlights and go ahead and start highlighting that up. It's just really sped up your base paint and your washing steps. Also, what you can do with that is if you're gonna work in thin layers of contrast paint, which I really think looks a lot better, it makes those highlights much brighter, it makes those shadows, more ability to kind of control where those shadows are. But one of the things that I like to do is I like to use multiple colors over the same place. So I might come over with a little bit of a lighter blue and it's gonna be pretty watered down. I want it to be pretty thin when I put it on. I don't want it to be extremely thick. I don't want it to be very heavy and opaque. And it's gonna kind of give the color I want. But then I come over with an even more thinned down, deeper blue color. And that will really be pushed into the shadows. And that helps me very quickly create a lot of highlights, a lot of shadows, and just overall a lot of contrast within my mini. So use those colors, not just as all in one, not just to slap onto your mini and say, well, it's done, which there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want a little bit more quality, use them as your base, shade, mix, and then work up from there. Trick number 2 would be learn to dry brush well. Now, I think dry brushing is the most misunderstood painting skill because a lot of people don't understand what it is to dry brush. A lot of people think that dry brushing is a technique that's used for terrain and it's used for vehicles. And outside of that, it has no use. I highly disagree with that. It's a great way to get good quality out of your miniatures while significantly speeding up your painting process. But it requires you to learn the skills to do it well. Let me give you a couple of tiny tips to go along with this trick. Number 1 is this. Do not use a cloth, do not use a paper towel, do not use something that is absorbent in order to wipe your paint off of when dry brushing. Because even though it's called dry brushing, what we don't want is a dried out brush and dried out paint. That's what leads to a very chalky consistency, what leads to adding a lot of texture to our miniatures, which when it comes to terrain, kind of is what we're looking for a lot of the time. That's why we use dry pigments because they look very good, they make it look very natural. But on our minis, that's not normally what we're going for. Use something like an MDF board, some spare plastic that you have laying around. There's a lot of stuff out there, especially with 3D printing, there's a lot of options out there. I use an Artist Opus MDF board that's specifically for this. It's a texture board and I absolutely love it. Because what you want is not that the paint is dry, you just want very little paint. You also don't want dried out bristles on your brush. You want a little bit of moisture in there. Use a moisture pad, a little dampening pad. Once again, Artist Opus has those, other brands have those. You can make your own, things like that. But learn how to use those and not get that chalky consistency. The other thing you really need to learn how to do when dry brushing would be to learn that the angle that you paint at, the angle that your brush strokes are coming from, matters a lot. Go and watch the Artist Opus YouTube channel and you're gonna get so many great tips on dry brushing. Man, he does such a great job. That channel does such a great job of really helping people to upgrade and to level up their abilities when it comes to dry brushing. But understand that the angles in which you come over are going to directly affect the quality of your paint job. When you start understanding that and you start using those angles, you start using, dry brushing has brush control. People think that, it really doesn't. It's just this kind of random motion. It's not. When you learn dry brushing technique and brush control, man, it allows you to paint so much faster, so much better. Not just for large miniatures, but even for your infantry size miniatures. It can really change the way that you paint your miniatures and get them higher quality and faster at the same time. Trick number 3 is this: focus on key elements. One of the biggest things to painting is being able to analyze models. I would highly encourage you, before you paint anything, sit down, analyze the model you're painting. What are the important parts of that model? What is it that you want to focus on? How do you want to paint this model? Because we could all take the same model, and the way we paint it is going to directly affect the way that people view it. Whether you're doing it really gritty, whether you're doing it really clean, whether you're doing it with a very dark scheme or you want a very light scheme, you want the light to hit from on top, you want the light to hit from the bottom, you want to add a glowing effect from the side, a very OSL, object source lighting, right? That's going to affect the entire feel of the model. Sit down, analyze your models. And here's how this helps you paint faster. Take a model, and 80 to 90% of that model you can paint basic. You can really cut corners, you can do a base and a wash. You could even just go with, I'm gonna add some contrast paints, I'm gonna throw a dry brush over it, quality, dry brush over it. But then you're gonna take 1 or 2 key elements. Maybe it's the face. Maybe your miniature, their face is a key part of it. And for a lot of miniatures, it is. Maybe it's a weapon they're holding. Maybe they've got a giant billowing cloak that really is a focal point. Maybe it's a breastplate. Maybe it's a piece of armor. Whatever it is, analyze the model, focus on 1 to 2 key elements of the model, and take those pieces and push the quality of your paint job. Everything else can be bare bones, can be bare minimum. And then all you do is you take those 1 or 2 elements and you go the extra mile. Those are what people are gonna look at, they're gonna focus on. If they're grabbing your models to study every little bit of it, well, fast paint jobs aren't built for that. But if they're gonna look at your model and decide with a knee-jerk reaction whether those are well-painted models, they're gonna focus on 1 or 2 key elements. And if those pop, they're gonna go, wow, these look great. So those are my 3 tips, my 3 tricks to painting models faster. Once again, faster doesn't just mean the fastest we can do. It means to paint them quickly with quality. But let me give you 2 bonus thoughts really quick. One is a bonus tip, and that's to plan your painting. Sit down, figure out everything that you're going to do with your paint job. Lay out the paints, lay out the schemes, lay out the ways in which you're going to paint this. If it's an army, decide if it's unit by unit or whether batch painting, who you're gonna paint, when you're gonna paint. It really increases your efficiency and it makes your entire painting process, one, more rewarding because you've already set out stages, and every time you finish a stage, there's that sense of accomplishment. It's not a completed mini, but you've accomplished one thing that you set out to do. But also it saves you time having to look through wherever you're storing your paints, even if it's conveniently laid out on your desk. That's time that you don't need to be stopping painting to do. That's something that you can do on your own at a different time so that when you come down, you sit down, you've got it all planned. My bonus trick would be this, and here's why this is a bonus trick, because not everyone has access to this. But my bonus trick, if you want to really speed up your painting, is get an airbrush. I understand, maybe you don't have the space, maybe you don't have the ability to have one because of whatever reason. It could be money, it could be space, it can be noise, it can be all of these different things, and I understand that. That's why this is a bonus trick. It's not absolutely necessary, but if you really do want to speed up your painting, an airbrush will do that significantly. I hope you guys are able to use these tips and these tricks to significantly increase your painting time. Because you know what we all want? More models painted on the table to play with. That's the goal. Don't become stressed out about it. Don't become focused on comparing yourself to somebody else's paint job. There's always better painters than you. There's always worse painters than you. Focus on yourself, because really that's the only thing you can control, is your ability to paint miniatures. And most of all, have fun with it. Thank you guys. Happy painting. I'll catch you guys next time.